Okay. All right. So we're recording this class this is our color awareness class, all about color adjustments, and color theory. So today is March 27th, 2023. And so if somebody's watching this video, they'll know when it was recorded. All right. First of all, I mentioned that our assignment 2B, that's where we took the old photo, scanned it, and then tried to retouch it using the painting tools that we learned about last week. And so I'm hoping that you'll be able to share your assignments with the class. Just share your screen and show us your before and the after. So who would like to start? Was that a hand cam? Did I see a hand go up?
No, but I can start.
Thanks.
Okay, I have to share my screen, you said?
Yes, please.
Okay. 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 Oh no, that's not the right one. Okay. So this is my before picture. I don't know what just happened. Sorry, I don't know how to use this.
You have a magic mouse? It might be zooming in with your mouse.
I'm using my touchpad on my MacBook.
Oh, okay, that's
okay.
yeah, probably it. Okay, so you had this one with the older woman and the dog, and that one has scratches, it has
Right.
folds, it has dirt all the way through.
Yes. So for my after photo, I cropped it in a little bit just because there's some folds on the end.
Yeah.
And they're parts of the picture that I didn't really think were like critical for the picture. So I just cropped them out. So we had like a nice smooth edge. And
Good.
then I noticed that there was one big like hair or scratch that was really distracting right there. So I got rid
Yeah.
of that, as well as like all the grain on her face and like her arms and like in the sky and stuff. So
Good.
like I zoom in, like the grain is minimized. And then I colorized the photo, which it actually did it. I didn't really have to make many edits to it. I think I just saturated up here a little bit more because I think the tree was a little gray after I did it. So I think I just saturated up here, and then that was, I mean, other than getting rid of little details, I mean, basically all I did.
Okay, and I think that might have been a wire that was coming down, and I'm glad to see that you got the clapboards all lined up. So that's nice on the wall. And the dog looks good. And yeah, I like the colorizing. That adds a lot to it. Show the before again. Yep. And then there's after. Sweet.
Yeah,
Good. Very nice. I'm sure she'd
thank you.
love that if we printed it out. Okay. Who else has theirs ready to go?
I can go next.
Okay, Calvin, terrific. Aw.
Okay, so this is me as a baby, and it really got messed up. It used to be like perfect, but something like spilled on it,
Yep.
and it really damaged it. So here's my after. I think I managed to do the filter, what was it called? It was the dust and scratches filter, and I got rid of a lot of like these like this like grain,
Okay.
like these dust, like the dust on it. And then for this like weird,
Yeah,
I don't even know how to describe it. Like,
yeah, it looks like a chemical stain.
oh yeah, the chemical stain. For this, I just desaturated with a sponge. And I don't know, to me, I'm very impressed with how I did it because I literally just painted like the hand.
Wow.
I'm like, oh my
Yeah,
God, that does look,
that looks
that is so
great.
crazy.
Yeah. And remember too, I don't know if you have, I see in your layers panel, you have background versus if you
Yeah,
click off the top background copy, do you see the old one? Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. You can put the old picture in your background layer, and then the new one in the next layer up. And then you'll never lose the two of them, so that you could always show before and after
Yeah.
right next to each other. So that's great though. You did a nice job with getting rid of all of the damage.
And then I tried to do like this little like signature,
Yep.
but it was like too damaged, and I'm like, it doesn't really add anything, so I just took it away.
Okay, as long as that wasn't a copyright from the photographer that would get all upset, but
Yeah.
probably not. If it's older than 70 years, it wouldn't be a problem, but I doubt it is old.
Yeah, and it's for personal. There's another like photo that I have, so I
Right.
didn't think it really mattered.
Now, many people might print this out on their inkjet printer at home. And can you turn on your rulers, the Command R?
Yeah.
Or Control R? And if we look at this right now, it looks like it's probably in pixels. Can you right click and put it in inches? So it's about a 5:7 currently. So if you were to print that out and send it to Hunt's or Ritz Camera or CVS and say that you want it printed as a 5:7, they would print this out, and it would be from a high quality printer. So their printers use dyes that over time don't fade when sun hits them or air. And so their printers are going to be better than the ones that we have at home that still can do photos. And some inks are even better. You can buy more expensive ink for your inkjet printer, but the ones at the professional photo printing places, those actually use a dye material that is so much better than anything that we have at our home. So if
Yeah.
you want to keep this and display it or give it to your mom and dad, whatever, that's something you want to think about. Just spending the $2, $3 and have it printed professionally and put it in a
Yeah.
frame.
Oh,
Nice.
I also used the clone tool to just fix like these splotches.
Yep. I think
Yeah.
the bigger ones you'd probably have to. Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Great. Good job. Okay. Who else has something to share? Okay, Sophia, did you get a chance to work on it?
Yeah, I have one to share. I just used one of the photos that
Okay.
I did because
Yep.
I moved recently, so all my stuff's in storage. But
Oh boy.
okay, wait, can you see it?
Sure. Yep. The kid with the
Yes. So this is the
double-breasted suit.
before. It's not like, oh, there we go. Let's see it.
Okay.
Oh, I'm doing the same thing that Cam did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
so
good.
this is the before, and then this is the after.
Okay.
After seeing Cam's though, I like how he did like the color correction too. So I think I want to play around with it more and like do that.
Sure.
His looks
Sure.
like so good.
And
after.
and there are some hand tools that we worked with, which would be like the sponge and the lightening and darkening. And if you make it into a black and white versus the color, that is something, but we're going to go through color corrections today. And then you'll realize, okay, even with a selection, you can select certain parts and change those. So after today's lesson, it might even be easier to do some color correcting.
Sounds good.
Great. Okay. All right. Who else has something? Zach, do you have a before and after to show us?
I have a question. Yeah, I have to find.
Okay. Grabiel, what did you have for a question?
Okay. I choose the keys with the all white and the eyes and the background and everywhere. The picture
Okay.
that you gave us. Okay. I want to know, how can I fix the eyes?
That one is very difficult. If you saw Calvin's, it's almost drawing it or picking something up or even going to another photo and copying the eyes and bringing them over.
That's what that was my question, because I would like to bring it from another place. If I would,
It's very difficult. Yep. And so if you can find them somewhere else, if they're
okay.
totally obliterated, you can't see anything anymore. I've had to do that in the past. Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Were you able to find them, Zach?
All right, so I don't, it's not in my Photoshop at all, but
Oh.
I can
Did you-
literally do the whole thing right now. I remember everything I did.
Nope. Did you upload them to
I did upload
Blackboard?
it, yeah.
So if you go into Blackboard, you should be able to see them in Blackboard, and you can show the before and after. That
All
might
right,
be
1 minute.
okay. Now, I mentioned last time that retouching, you think it should be easy, you think it should be fast, and 2 hours after you begin, you may be halfway done on some of these jobs because you're zoomed in so much if it's a high resolution image that it takes a long time to get things to look exactly like they should, or they should have been in the original. So don't get frustrated or think that you're slow. It really takes a lot of practice and understanding of what each tool does and which one is going to get you the special effect that you're looking for. So that comes with practice and trial and error. Okay. All right. Yoselin, do you have anything to show us for your before and after?
Not at the moment, but I will be working on it today.
Okay, not during class, because
know,
we
I
have
know.
things to do during class. Okay, and I'm going to let Zach look for his. I just don't want, this is a fill class. It just takes a lot of time to talk about color and get into color. So I'm going to try to move things along, if you don't mind. And now, when I went to school for graphic design, we had a whole course just on color theory. And so what we're doing, okay, Zach, did you have something that you could share?
Yeah.
Excellent. Why don't we do that while you're, see that you got onto the computer that you can use.
All right. This was my before. It's kind of different. It is different.
Okay. If you do me a favor and go up to your image at the top screen, image, and then rotate. So if you go to that image and then image rotation, do a 90 degrees counterclockwise. Oops. 180. Good. Okay. I don't know why, but my brain just likes to see it as it would be there. That's an interesting image.
It's from my hometown
Okay.
in Canada.
Nice. Now, one other thing you'll notice, if this picture was taken with a camera instead of a scanner, notice how it's not laying quite flat, and some of the highlights and things you're getting are because it had a little bit of a wrinkle or a curl to it. So keep that in mind, that a scanner will always get you more pixels and a better rendition when you're scanning or trying to capture an image. Okay. And what did you have for your after? Okay. Interesting.
I made it look like a painting instead. I just really like to do that.
Yeah, so you added some texture to it and then did a little bit of posterization, it looks like, to get some sort of flat watercolor look to it. Interesting. Now, did you use any other tools? What tools did you use?
Mostly the helium brush,
Okay.
and I added I don't even know what kind of filter it was, but
Yeah, it looks
some
like a
type of
texture.
filter.
Yeah, texturized filter.
Yeah, it wasn't
Interesting.
much.
Now, where in Canada is that from?
Quebec, or I think it's somewhere.
Yeah, it
I
looks
forget some
Quebec
French.
for some reason. My family's from New Brunswick, which is next door, but very different. Yeah. Okay. Terrific.
Thank you.
All right. Good. All right. So now I think we're going to kick into the color mode, and I'm going to start with a presentation, just a little bit of an overview on color theory. And when I say color theory, it's what makes up color, how do we get color, how do your eyes perceive color? So we're going to start there, and I'm going to share that with you. And okay, let me go into full screen mode just so we can see that. Okay. This is going automatically, and I don't want it to go automatically. Okay, so the physics of light. Something we need to understand is that the reason that we see color is because light beams have certain color frequencies or certain frequencies to them. And that light, they're called photons, those will activate with a receptor in your eye. And so they actually work with different receptors, and it will, light oscillates, it moves, and we see the wavelengths between 380 and 760 nanometers. That will become clear in a minute. And so depending on which wavelengths, the 380, 760, or somewhere in between, those will give us different colors. Now, if we were to look at all the different types of waves that are out there, wavelengths, we've got gamma rays. We heard about those in science fiction. They're actually real, and science uses them, medical field uses them. Same thing with X-rays. And these, our eyes, the receptors in our eyes cannot see these. They're invisible. We cannot perceive them, but they're all around us, just so you know. So for an X-ray, they have a certain type of material, a receptor that can see those rays. And so that's why they can do X-rays of our body, because the machine can actually see the wavelengths from here. Then we hear about UV light, ultraviolet light. All of those wavelengths we don't see. So you're at the beach and you're thinking, oh, it's kind of a cloudy, overcast day. I don't have to worry about getting sunburned. It's these UV that actually burn you. And so it doesn't matter if it's bright and sunny, you can still get burned by UV light. When the sun is closest to the earth, the UV is going to be stronger, that ultraviolet light. Then we have this little section right here, which is the visible light. So from that 360 to 700 or so, 760 nanometers, it starts with the indigos and violets and blues. Then it transitions to the greens, yellows, oranges, and reds. So if we're looking at about a 600 nanometer, we're going to see oranges. If we're looking at about a 430, 440, we're looking at a blue or an indigo. Then after that, we have infrared. Infrared is like those goggles that you see, the night vision scopes that they have. Those wavelengths are all around us, but they're not green. They put a filter onto those night vision scopes that allow them to see those wavelengths. Normally our eyes would not see those. So it takes those wavelengths, and typically they're green, so they put them around 500 in the visible spectrum. So now we can see infrared, but it's really not something that normally we'd be able to see. And then there are more wavelengths, microwave, radio waves, again, all around us, but we just don't visually see them. Okay, properties of light. Let's talk about light. Light, if we think about all wavelengths of light, from the blues all the way through to the red, all these rainbow of colors, they start all together as white light. So when our eyes see white, it's actually all of these wavelengths together equal white. If I turn the light off in a dark room, now I see black. That's because there's no wavelengths of light that my eye will perceive. So white has all the colors of the spectrum, all the wavelengths. And if we see a prism, then it can break those wavelengths into the 380 up to 760 individuals. Why do we see a rainbow? A rainbow is because there's droplets of water still in the air, in the sky. What are droplets of water? It's a little prism. So you think of a droplet of water, the white light goes through it, and what comes out the other side is the individual banding of the wavelengths. So we see a rainbow. Now, light can be absorbed, it can be reflected or refracted. This is refracted, where we break it into individual wavelengths for our eyes to see the bands. If it's absorbed, if I start with a blue light bulb, I'm seeing these wavelengths right here coming out of this light, no other wavelengths. However, if it hits something black, it's going to absorb it. That's why I see black. If it hits something that it allows it to bounce the blue light off of, I'm going to see blue. Okay, so reflected light is whatever you're starting with, it hits it, and now my eye is going to see whatever that reflection was. It will not see the absorbed light because there is no light there. Okay, so white light has all the wavelengths. Monochromatic. When we talk about mono, that means one. Chromatic means color. And so one wavelength of light, like the reds, the greens, the blues, those are mono. Now, if I have the sun is white light. It has all the different colors of the rainbow. The reason I see this leaf is green is not because it's made from green light. It's because it absorbed from the white light, the red, the yellow, the blue, the indigo. It absorbed those. The only one that reflected off was green. So whatever this substance is made of, this leaf, it reflects green light. That's why we see this as green. It's kind of a weird thing to think of, that it's because it's absorbing all the other light that it doesn't look that way. Now, we need to talk about vocabulary. We need to talk about the terms when it comes to color. Wavelength, another term that normally a graphic designer or color artist would use, is hue. Hue is the big family of color. When we think about the rainbow, the Roy G. Biv, the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, those are hues. So it's the big family of color. Then we talk about the purity of that color, of that blue, let's say, or the saturation is another word for that. And so how saturated is the blue? If I said this one over here, I might say that this is a screaming blue. Over here, I might say it's a muted blue. It's a grayish blue. So blue is the hue. You always have to have the hue in there. And then you're describing the saturation, how intense that blue is. Then we have brightness or illuminance. Think of the blue that we have. And then if we added white to it, it's going to make it brighter. If we add black to it, it makes it darker. So in Photoshop, we actually have the ability to describe a color as a hue, saturation, and brightness number. Most people don't. They get used to the RGB numbers or the CMYK numbers, but some color specialists will use these actual numbers. Now, we need to think about color as a three-dimensional space. This is a little weird, but if we think of a stack of CDs or albums, and each one of them has a certain amount of black on it, then less black, all the way up to white. If we pulled one from the center, it would have this much gray on everything. And then starting in the middle, we start with a not very saturated. And as we go out towards the outer edge of the CD, it would have the intense saturation. As we go around the circle, that's where we get the different hues. So we think of our color wheel, and then we think of a stack of color wheels, and each one of those stacks has a different amount of black to white. So that's a three-dimensional color space so that we can get hue, saturation, and brightness described for each color that we want to talk about. Now, there are two different color mixings. We've got additive color, which is projected light, and subtract color, which is paint or ink. So when we're talking about additive light, it's your primaries are the red, green, and blue. So that, think of your monitor or even the rainbow. When those lights, I had in my class where I took my color theory, we had 3 different color projectors with 3 different circles. One was a red circle, one projector had blue, one projector had green. When we crossed those over each other, the center where we had green, red, and blue became white. So we're sitting in a dark auditorium and they converged these projectors for the overlap light. And it was like, what? That's crazy. You see green, blue, and red equals white. If I overlap the green and blue, it's funny, but it makes cyan. Green and red make yellow. Red and blue make magenta. So this is additive light, light that is projected at you. So think of your monitor or some type of a projection screen. Subtractive. This is where you put something like ink or paint on a surface. The light comes down, hits that surface, bounces the wavelength of light back up to you, and it absorbs some of it. And the color that it bounces back is the color that you'll see. So we normally print with cyan, magenta, and yellow. Those are the colors that are, say, in your inkjet printer at home. So you have inkjet cartridges that can put a solid cyan, a solid yellow, and a solid magenta like this. If I take yellow and cyan and put them on top of each other in your inkjet printer, that's how I get green. Yellow and magenta gives me red. magenta, and cyan give me blue. When I add all three of these colors together, I should get black. What I really get is a dark gray, because for subtractive color to work, the cyan, magenta, and yellow have to be transparent. The inks kind of have to be weak so that we can see through them. So the reason I see green here is because the yellow and the cyan, when they're overlapped, I can see through the cyan and see that there's yellow below it. That makes sense. So I'm going to see overlapping colors. So it's weaker color. The problem is when I put cyan, magenta, and yellow together to get black, I get a dark gray because it's seeing through them, but it's still not great. That's why we add a fourth color to CMY, and it's not just like the red, green, and blue. Okay, we add black ink to it. That's what why there's another channel or another tone here. All right, back in the 30s, 1930s, in France, all these color physicists got together because nobody could really describe the color they wanted. They just said it's a rosy pink color. That wasn't going to work. So now they wanted to describe the actual color by numbers. And so they went out and got their physics and all of their light meters and were able to plot where each wavelength of color and combination would end up. It's called a chromaticity diagram. And it can be used to map or identify what we can see in photography if we use film versus a digital camera. What we can do with printing when we take that photograph and print it on a printing press. What it's going to look like in TV or in a movie. So when I look at this chromaticity diagram, this is everything, every color that is in the visible spectrum. This is called the color gambit. That's our eye capacity, everything we can see. The problem is, if I took a camera that had film in it, everything inside this outer black line, that's everything inside that is what film can see. So these really bright greens or saturated blues, these saturated reds, film cannot see. Your color monitor, your display, that's even less. And that's a high quality display. A lot of laptops are even less than this. So inside here, so all of these reds and greens and blues, I cannot display, but I can see outside with my eye, I can see all of these colors. Then if we take cyan, magenta, yellow, and black and print it on coated paper, shiny paper, these are the colors that I can, and newsprint. So newsprint is like in a newspaper. It's kind of that math paper brownish. It's even less. That's what's on the inside here. So you know how you took a picture with your camera of a sunset and you said, this is the most gorgeous sunset I've ever seen. Then you bring it up on your monitor or you print it out to your printer at home and you say, that's not that great. I wonder why I thought that was great. That's because when you printed it, you only got this red and this orange and this blue. We couldn't capture what our eyes saw, which was all of this and all of these yellows and all of these greens. So that's the scary thing. We cannot trust our monitor to represent what we actually saw when we were taking the photo. The devices have limitations. They cannot show you every color of the wavelengths from 8 860 to 430 nanometers. Each device has its own capability. So one monitor may be different than another monitor. Your laptop or your phone may be different than your desktop or your TV set. And we can never really use our monitor to predict what we're going to see in a magazine ad that's printed, because that has to go to a press and it has a smaller color range. Oops. So remember that the printing type of machine, the ink, the paper, all of those will affect how much color is reflected back to your eye when we're talking about subtractive color. Now, there are some things that we can do to make this better, and it's called color management or calibration of your different devices. So if I start with this bowl of strawberries and whipped cream, one of the things I know is if I put this on my scanner, when I scan that, let's say the glass on my scanner has a little bluish tinge to it. When it scans this picture, everything in this picture is going to have a little more blue. So the white whipped cream is going to be a light blue whipped cream. I don't want that. So we can calibrate this device, this scanner, and tell it every time you scan a little blue in it. So we make what we call a lookup table. And this lookup table characterizes your scanning device. And it says every time you scan, take blue away from it and then store the file on my computer. Now, if you go to print and you say, oh, the printer definitely doesn't look like the original because maybe it now adds yellow. It's more concentrated in the yellow. We can actually do a calibration on the printer, store a lookup table that whenever we go to print to this printer, it takes a little yellow away. Same thing with our monitor, with a proofing device that goes before you go to a printing press, or even my printing press. If I use Toyo inks, which are the #1 inks in Japan, for some reason, they have a much cleaner yellow. And so everything looks much brighter. The lime greens are much more lime green. So the problem is, if I'm printing the same advertisement in a United States magazine and in a Japanese magazine, it's going to look one way in the US magazine. It's going to look different in the Japan magazine, which the advertisers hate. They want them to be the same. They want to sign off on this proof, the preliminary that they see before it goes on to the printing press. They want the same thing that they saw in the proof to come off of each one of those magazines. So we need to make sure we understand. So I can have a calibration for Japanese printing, and I can have a calibration for North American printing, which uses the same CMYK. Now, how many of you have ever been tested for color blindness? Anybody? Okay. Well, it's interesting, but about 9% of the population has some level of color blindness. So that's almost 10%. That's almost 1/10 of the population. What happens is your pigments or the photoreceptors in your eyes are not seeing colors or the wavelengths. They're not absorbing the wavelengths as they should be. So a red-green deficiency, not being able to see the red and green wavelengths, that's the most common one. So when we talk about this, we can have total color blindness, which lacks your cones in your eye. They cannot receive. A monochromat, which is a one color, has one cone that can't be working. Dichromats And then we see that there are some cones that sense red, green, or blue. So depending on which cone is not functioning at its full level or at all, that's how you will see color. So it always amazes me when someone says, I can, my favorite color is green. Someone else might say, oh, green is such a boring color. It might be that they're colorblind and they're not even seeing the same thing that you're seeing. So we need to think about that. Color blindness is almost a accessibility handicap issue. We need to think about how we handle color. So I'm going to have you actually do a color blindness after this. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on here, but what color blindness tests usually do is show you a certain color background and then numbers or letters or shapes inside. And if you can see the numbers that are in these circles, then you're probably not. This one right here, if you wouldn't mind going to Enchroma, I'm going to escape this. And what Enchroma is, they're pretty amazing. They have a device. They have, let's see. Let me see if I can go to home. They have glasses. These sunglasses that you see here help with people that cannot see color. So this is what someone may see without the glasses. If they put these glasses on, they will see purples. They will see greens.
I need those.
Okay, that's amazing. These glasses are just, they have videos on here on this website that actually show people crying when they've put them on for the first time, just because they've never seen all the colors that everybody else. So what I'd like you to do is go to enchroma.com, and I'm going to have you take it takes probably 1 minute, 2 minutes or less. I don't want to know the results. You don't have to tell me if you're colorblind or not, but I want you to take this colorblind test. So when you click on this, it will tell you remove your glasses, set your screen to make sure it's bright, and then click on this. At the end, it will ask you, do you want to pay for the results? No, there's a button there that says no, just show me the results. Okay, so when you take this test, what happens is it shows you a circle with a number in the middle. So then you just click that number. Oops, and I'm going too slow for it. So it doesn't. So I want you to take this test. Okay, so you go and you figure it out. And I think it will randomize yours as well. So you're not going to see the same one that I do. So I'm even going to stop sharing right now so that you can do it on your full screen. So do that in enchroma.com and do your color blindness test. Now, I think they said there was a statistic out there. Let me see if I can find that on their web page.
And what I really don't understand, like I'm already colorblind, but I've never been able to see any of those magic eye paintings, you know, that you're supposed
Wow.
to see
Yeah.
3D images.
Yep.
Doesn't work.
Oh yeah. I have to go really cross-eyed to be able to see those. It's funny. Okay. This is saying when I look at their statistics, 1 out of 12 men have some kind of color blindness. 1 out of 200 women. I'm not sure why women and men's eyes are that much different, but 1 out of 12 or 8% of the men, and 1 out of 200 or 0.5%, so less than 1% of women. So if you have 12 men in a room, you might look around and say, if I'm not colorblind, maybe one of these guys is. And then you look at their clothing, what they're wearing, and you say, oh, okay, that's an interesting color choice. Okay, everybody getting there or finished? Okay, I'm going to go back to the sharing of the screen. Okay, and so we can see on this website more information if you want to find out more about color blindness and accessibility. Do they have an accessibility program? One of the things that there is a website out there, and I need to go and find it, but you can submit one of the designs that you've done. You can submit the design and it will tell you, it will show you what it would look like with if a person with color blindness is looking at that. So
I have done.
Okay, great. All right. It's moving around. So what I want you to see, excuse me, color blindness. This is the way a normal vision would see. If you're a monocrat, only one of the cones, it's going to, this image up here is going to look like this. Pronotanopia is going to be like this, and a deuteropanopia is going to look like this. How does that correlate to a photo? So if this is the normal photo, notice we have green trees back here. We have a woman with kind of auburn hair with a purple jacket on. If we're looking at the pro, all the greens are going to look goldish orange. The purples will look like a royal blue. And even the face is toned down. Now, if we're looking at the dual, the 2, now we have less in this background. If we're looking at the tri, now the greens in the background look like they're just grays. The purple doesn't even look blue anymore. It looks more like a brown. So this is tough for most people that have normal reaction with their cones. But think about a game that you might play. We need to think about what we call accessibility, making sure that every person out there, doesn't matter what their handicap is, can enjoy a game like this. Now, what's wrong with this game? They have to play by color. So the light blues, light blues, light blues, if you have to pick all the light blues, we're going to have a problem because they may see these greens as the same color as this light blue. So how about we do something like this, where we're playing with shapes and color? So we can still enjoy the color component and have it bright and vibrant with the color for those that can see those, but now we've got a shape there as well. So this is why I'm saying if we can go to a website and upload, if we uploaded this and said, show it to me with a filter on it that a person that is colorblind is going to see with a red-green deficiency, we'll see that half those colors may not show up. Whereas this one, half the colors don't show up, but the shapes will still show up and there'll be a lightness or a darkness difference. Okay. Now, Something else we need to understand about color. The color surrounding it, the way your eye works is we have peripheral vision. We can see a little bit more than just the center of whatever we're staring at. So the issue is, depending on what color is around another color, it will look different. So if I look at this red and then I look at this red, they look a little different. Or this green versus this green, they are the same color, but it actually, because the surround is different, we're going to see a different color. Same thing can happen. This gray might be, or black might look lighter than this black because of the white surrounding it. Now, what I'd like you to do is, if you can, stare at that yellow dot in the middle. I'm not going to make you stare at it for 30 seconds, but stare at that for a minute, a little bit longer. Keep staring. Try not to blink. Keep staring at it. Keep staring, the yellow right in the middle. What do you see?
It's terrible.
What did you see?
It's still there.
You actually saw,
I saw a shadow of the yellow color.
you saw the opposite. I was staring at this yellow, yellow, yellow in the middle with the blue surround, stare at it, stare at it. And now I'm seeing blue in the middle and yellow on the outside. The opposite colors. That's what we call latent color imaging. Your eyes, the cones, actually recorded some of the colors or what they were compensating for. And so when you're trying to evaluate color, whether you're picking clothing at the store and you're staring at it saying, is this the right color peach that I want? Look away and look back, because those colors will actually be burned into your eyes. So it will affect something else that's surrounding it. When I look at something like these, the dark blues and the yellows, the reds and the blues, these blues, this blue stripe is the same blue stripe on top of the skull versus in this background. But here, to me, it looks a lot more royal blue. Over here, it looks navy blue, but they're the same color. So it's very strange when you start evaluating certain colors, okay? There's another website out there that you can go to, and if I double click, copy this, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this is something that you can do on your own. But this is a color game, an online color game. So when you press this, you can go in and test your hue, saturation, and brightness. And it's really kind of testing your color blindness as well, but in a different way. So when you click on it, it's going to say, okay, you have to match the color that's in the middle, match these colors till you don't see any more. So right about there. Great, that one I did. So now I have to come around until I don't see this color anymore. Not doing a great job. So it will go through hues, and then it will go through saturations, and it will go through brightness. And so I'm going to stop this because I'm going to fail this test. Anyway, I want you to do that. While I'm here, we talked about calibrating your monitor. If you are trying to fix color in Photoshop, you're trying to use all the color tools that we're going to talk about next in Photoshop. Problem is, if your monitor is set really bright, or it's set at the low contrast, high brightness, if the color isn't balanced, it will give a problem. You won't have the same reaction on your monitor as they do on someone else's display. So We have one of these in the actual classroom back in Lynn, and this is called a spider. Notice it has this little lens in here, and what they do is you put this on your monitor, so you hang it over. The other end of this plugs into a USB, and then we start a software program. That software program will, let's see, once we put this on here, it starts flashing colors, and it flashes like 500 colors. This is just showing a couple basic, but it will take a picture or a reading every time it flashes a new color, and it saves that in a file. That file is then put into your preferences. So when I go up to my Apple system preferences and I go to displays, it will show me my display settings. I have 2 monitors on here. And so when I go to these display settings, it will create one of these. These are, think of skewing the color or changing the color for certain things. When I come up with a rose color, the spider device said that it was too pink. It should be less rose. And so it stores that. It stores that. It stores the next one, stores the next one. It will then create one of these. And so if I select a different one of these, my monitor, I don't know if you can see it, but my monitor actually changes the color that's on the monitor. So I think in the old days, I actually had mine stored here, but I don't see it anymore because I brought that device home with me. So iMac, or maybe iMac calibrated, this would be the machine, the curve or adjustments. So then when I say, great, this is stored for this monitor now, every picture, every website, everything that comes up on this screen is now altered slightly because this device said, nope, your monitor is not showing you the color correctly. So it really makes a lot of sense to, I think these may cost about $120. So in the case of a photographer or someone that's doing a lot of Photoshop color correcting work, they would buy one of these devices and they would calibrate every single monitor in the studio. Okay, everybody's computer would have to see that. Okay, so that's spider. There are other ones. This is a colorimeter. There are spectrophotometers, which are the higher level. They might be $2,000 instead of $150. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, so, all right. Let me see if there was anything left in here. I think that may be. Yep, that's the end of this presentation. All right. Any questions on the presentation, the color presentation that we're looking at? Okay. Now we need to talk about how Photoshop does color. So I'm going to stop sharing this and make sure in my list, gotten through the presentation, calibrating the monitor. So I've said that the monitors don't always show you the color correctly, and printed, things that are printed like in a magazine will show you even less. So what does that mean? It means that we need to have a method of grabbing color or seeing color that's been printed. So if I go into Photoshop, I know I can go into my foreground color and say, show me a brick red, and pick a brick red off of the monitor. if my monitor is brick red, it's not going to look like that when I put it in the type and print it in the ad. What can I do? The best thing you can do is find the color that you want that's been printed. So something like this book that I have right here, and you're not going to see it with my, well, the best way I can do this is, hold on a second. I'm going to share. I'm going to share my, there it is. Okay. If I share, I have a book right here, the Graphic Designer's Handbook. This is a book that I've had forever, but one of the things I like about this book is it has a little section on color theory, and then what it has is this section. And this is a printed chart where each one of these colors that's in here, if I define and find that this is the color rose that I want to use in my ad for my headline, I'm just looking at this color saying, yep, that's the color. I know that this color, if I come up here, it has 90% magenta, 20% cyan for this color right here. Come over and see 20%. And then every square on this page has 50% yellow. So now if I want this color right here, I can put in 20, 90, 50, 0, black, and this is the color. Now, I bet on my monitor, it won't look like this color because my monitor looks different than things that get printed. So if I pick it from something that's printed, I'm more lucky or more guaranteed, not luck, guaranteed that it's going to look a lot more. Now, every page in this color tint guide has a different amount of yellow. So all of these patches have 80% yellow. This page has 90% yellow. And notice the colors are getting more vibrant or more lime green or more red because it's getting more yellow. If I look back here, they're almost pastel because these only have 20% yellow across them. 10, 0. This page right here has no yellow at all. So now if I look at, say, this color, it's more of a purpley color. It has 90% magenta and 20%. So this is how I would pick the colors that I'm going to type into Photoshop into the color picker. And so this is one book like this. And I actually worked a lot with a printer in upstate New York, Broderick Press. They actually made this book off of their printing press. And so it has a lot of the same things. So each one of the patches on this page have yellow, 10% yellow, but then it goes every 5% increment, not every 10. And over here, this added a little bit of black. So you can see it, each square has 5, 15, 20, 10, 20, 40. So when I look at these colors, think of this page right here, but now I've just added a certain amount of black. So if this is the color blue that I want, I take whatever this patch is from over here, and then I add this amount of black to it right there. Okay, so this, and remember we talked about the surround color makes a difference. One of the things this printer came up with is if I have white, if it's going on a white page, I want to see what the color looks like with white surround. If it's going on a dark, they give you this little dark surround. So I love this printer because they just were so smart in the way that they did everything. No, these are what they call color tint guides, and you can get those. We also have Pantone. Who knows what Pantone is? Anybody? Pantone is a company in New Jersey, and what they do is they make these little fan charts. And look at all the different colors that I have. And these fan charts are great to show me that, let's see, we've got all these different tones, and in one column, this left column, this would be if I wanted this color green right here, I'd call and order a can of Pantone 333. Pantone 333 is going to give me this mint green right here. If I can't order a special can of ink like your printer at home, you can't put an extra ink cartridge into your printer at home and say, I want to print that color. So what you do is you say, oh, give me the closest thing to Pantone 333. That's this right here. Do these two colors look the same? Not at all. But if I type in 56 cyan, 0 magenta, 30 yellow, I'm going to get this green right here. This is the green I wanted, or the customer wanted. The problem is with cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, this is as close as we can get to a can of ink that's with the shades and the dyes this color. So this is the problem we have. Customers will pick from any color that they see in the world, and they pick from the left column. What we need to do is have them pick from the right column. The right column is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. That's the lowest common denominator. If I can grab this color green or bluish green and my customer's happy, terrific. But if they try and say, no, I give you this Tiffany's box and I want this color turquoise, this is as close as you're going to get with cyan, magenta, yellow, and black on a printing press. So we need to understand that we want our customers to pick. Now, in some cases, the colors are going to be close, like this page right here. Yeah, there's a little bit more reddish over here, but the colors are close until I get down here. But even down at the bottom, they're pretty close. So I wouldn't have to order a can of ink because I can make it from cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. It's only when we get up to some of these colors where we have a really tough time with matching. Purples are tough, browns are tough, and some of the blues are definitely tough. So this is called a Pantone color bridge. And it shows me cyan, magenta, yellow, and black on this column. CMYK versus solid can of ink. And so we need to make sure that we're ordering or doing color the right way. If it's for a printed ad or a brochure or magazine, I need to be specifying color in cyan, magenta, yellow, and black from the right column. All right, because the monitor will always show it brighter. Now, if you don't know, if you're just getting started with picking colors, There's another book out there called Color Index. And what I like about Color Index is as I look in here, if I'm looking at this, I can find 3 color combinations. It shows me a little graphic. And as I look through this, I say, okay, I'm looking for some warm tones, maybe on this page. And I need to pick some warm tones that go with each other. Here are 5 different tones: a gold, a lighter gold, a brown, a pink, and sort of a maroon. And I put all of those, put all of those together. And these are the color combos that I could make. So if I'm in Illustrator and pick flat colors, or have colors that I'm painting with using the painting tools in Photoshop, I can see these right here. And one of the nice things is for each one of these colors, it gives the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black numbers so that I could put that into my color picker, or the red, green, and blue numbers. So that's a great thing. And this book has loads and loads of color combinations. So I can see what they look like with the little graphics, but also it gives me so if you're not really all that good at color picking, but now I can tell there's enough contrast in these. I think I like these orange and reds and pinks better than these up here. So investing in something like the Color Index might be a good idea as well. So I've got a lot of these different color book type things. All right, I'm going to stop sharing with my phone anyway. How good are you with color, picking colors? Would you be the person that a friend says, does this shirt match this tie or this sweater and shirt? Is that something that you'd be called on to do? Or if they're going to paint something, paint a room, which color do you like better, this one or this one? That's one of the tough things that we need to acknowledge, is if we're really good at color, or maybe we've done a color blindness test and realized maybe we're not as good at color as we thought. And so you just need to make sure that you're understanding that if you're deficient in color evaluation, there are things that you can do and ways that you can work around that. Okay. So I'm going to jump into the actual color tools in Photoshop a little bit, and then we'll take a break. About 2 o'clock, we'll take a break. Okay, so I'm going to share screen. And obviously I needed a picture, so I put a picture of me visiting Rockport. So when I look at this picture, or when you look at this picture, how would you characterize, how would you describe this picture? Tell me about the colors that are in this picture. Somebody, anybody?
There's a lot of blues.
Okay. And the blues that are in the sky, what do you think about the blues that are in the sky? Can you really define all the clouds?
They're oversaturated, or I mean, overexposed.
Okay, good. Overexposed, they're kind of like washed out. Okay, what we call washed out. I can't tell if these clouds are just a flat little something that somebody stuck on there, cut a piece of paper out, white paper, and stuck it on here. Because it's overexposed, there's no detail in here. So if I use my info panel and come down to these clouds, notice when I move around in the cloud, the numbers are staying the same over here in the info panel. What they're supposed to do is when I move, they're supposed to show me tone difference. If they don't show you any tone difference, if the numbers stay the same, it means there's no detail because it's not changing, getting lighter or darker to show you where there's a wrinkle or a puff in the cloud. If this was just gray water, if it didn't move, it's moving slightly. So that's showing me that there's a little bit of texture in this water, but not a lot. So it's one percentage point up or down in the harbor here. And so that's not a lot of difference if I want to show that the water has ripples. We need tone difference in here. Okay, so what we need to acknowledge when we first look at a picture is I have washed out color here. I have too dark. In this section, it is way too dark. It's in the shadow between two buildings. I'm standing, taking the selfie with the motif number 3, I think it is, behind me. And everything out here looks okay, but the sky, but everything here is a little too dark. So now I have to evaluate this picture if I need to fix it, and I need to adjust highlights, which are the light areas in a picture, midtones, which are the medium tones, and shadows, which are the dark tones. So highlights are usually up to 10%. When I'm looking at these numbers in the CMYK, highlights are 0 to 10. Then we go into the midtones. 50% is right smack in the middle of the midtones. And then in the darkest part of my pictures, those are going to be shadows. Things from 75% on up is typically a shadow. And so problem is when I look at this water or even this yellow, let's look at the gray water here, grayish. I have 30% cyan, which makes that a midtone. But I have 15% magenta and yellow. That kind of makes that more closer to a highlight. So as I'm looking at these tones, I have to evaluate, and what we have are channels. When I'm looking at a red, green, and blue, I have red, green, and blue. This is what it's projecting to the monitor, to the lights that are blue on my monitor, green to the monitor, and red light in the monitor. So when I put the red, green, and blue lights together, I get RGB, all of these turned on. Now, if this picture were going to be in North Shore Magazine tourism section, I would need to go up, and for their website, I'd want it to stay red, green, and blue. But for the print, I need to go under image, mode, and change this to cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And it's going to pop this up and say, how do you want to create the black? Remember, we have cyan, magenta, and yellow, but it doesn't create a dark enough black. So it's going to create one for us. And the way that it creates that is based on a ISO standard. So it's either sheet fed or swap. How do we know? The magazine. If this is going in North Shore Magazine, it will tell me to use swap. If I'm doing a brochure for North Shore Community College and I'm printing it at Kirkwood Printing in Wilmington, they will probably tell me, no, use sheet fed to create the black. So I just have to be in touch with whoever's going to be printing the document. They give me a specification sheet. Just like that North Shore Magazine media kit we looked at, that's where it says use the coded swap. So when I do this, notice my channels went from red, green, and blue Now I have a cyan channel, a magenta channel, yellow, and black. And notice the black channel, I can't even see clouds out here. There's no water. It only puts black where I need a shadow, a dark shadow, because remember, cyan, magenta, and yellow put together will give me the grays in here. Those are highlights and midtones. I don't need black in here. That just adds a fourth element. It's only when I get up to the real dark areas of the picture, the walls in here, maybe the hot top, that I need black added to this. So the black ink, usually called the skeleton black because it's only in the darkest areas, will typically give you, from a mid-tone to a shadow, the most detail. So when I look at this, this actually looks like a better photo than this. So now I know back here, I need to adjust my cyan, my magenta, and my yellow to get the darker part of the person, me, in this, to get this working. So now I need to measure and say, okay, what would a good Caucasian old lady flesh tone be? I can take a measurement here and it says 38 cyan, 56 magenta, 65 yellow. And as I look at that, I'm thinking, I don't know if that is that's too dark for, I would never get that much tone on my face. And so I would need to change that. But just so you know, I can also look at it this way. Now I've turned on the cyan, magenta, and yellow, and the only thing I don't have is the black. So now when I look at this, I can definitely see that I need to do some work because this doesn't look right. So I would need to adjust the cyan, magenta, and yellow on this part of the picture, but probably not on this part of the picture. So now, using my color correction tools in Photoshop, I may be able to go in and say, just work on midtones, or just work on pinks in the picture. Or I may need to use a selection. So a selection, if I did something really quick, like this, now if I went in to make an adjustment, you'll notice if I go in and say that I want to work on just, and we're going to go through this the second half of the class, just so you know, so don't get too worked up. If I say the magenta in this area is too dark, so I can manipulate that and say lighten it up. If I then say, and the cyan needs to come down, maybe the yellow, now I'm looking a little jaundice. So I'm going to go into my yellow and work on just the midtones, which is what I'm doing here. So now if I look at before and after, I started dark like this, but I could lighten it up like that. Yeah, this selection isn't great because I didn't do a good job here and I went over to here, but I could adjust that as well. Okay, so keep that in mind as I'm working on this. I have the ability to work with these tools and make it more yellow or less yellow, more magenta, less magenta, neutralize something. And as I look over here at my forehead now, I started out with 38%. Check out, I don't know if you can see them on your monitor. It might look a little small, but I started out with 38% cyan. It's now down to 15%. Anytime you go more than 10%, plus or minus 10%, that's kind of scary. You're really altering the picture, just so you know. I went from 58 down to 36 in the magenta. 68 yellow down to 48. and I didn't touch the black, so 20 and still 20. If I wanted to lighten up even the black, I could take all the black out of there and it would really lighten it up, but then it wouldn't have the same. So I can lighten that up and make it a little bit better than it was, type of thing. Now, if you can do it without making a selection, that's even better. So we just have to identify, is everything else in the picture okay? If it's the whole picture that's bad, then we can go in and I can take this and get rid of it. If it's the whole picture that's bad, then I don't have to work with a selection at all. And I can just go into the picture and say, lighten it up or darken it up. But it's going to affect everything. It's a global change, entire image. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And we're going to go to break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about all the color adjustment tools that Photoshop gives us. So photographers or graphic designers that are using these have to do color manipulation to their pictures. It will give you a better way of doing that. Okay, so why don't we come back at about 2:15? All right, excellent. I will see you then. And if anybody has any questions over the break, I can answer those too. When we're opening up an image, we check size. We check to see if there are any anomalies, any dirt, scratches, things in the picture like trash that we need to get rid of. We also check color. And so what we're talking about today, we've talked about color theory so far, and red, green, and blue versus CMYK. Remember, red, green, and blue is for the web or for a display or TV. CMYK is for something that gets printed out. And so we have to control the channels. And when I talk about channels, that's something in Photoshop. Another word for channels in the old days before Photoshop, we called it separations. We were separating the colors into individual color files, and then you'd put them together. So I'm going to share my screen again. And what I have now put on the screen is 2 different wedding dress pictures. And when you think of a wedding dress, you think of a white dress, and usually, unless it's all satin, there's going to be some kind of a lace or flowers or something on there. But when I think of a wedding dress, this one, in this case, I'm looking at it and it is CMYK. So as I look at this, I can go down to normally where my layers panel is. I can also check channels. Channels is just another one of these panels that we have. And so I have a channels. And with channels, this is what's going to get printed on your printer with cyan ink. This, where you see a dark gray or a black, it's going to get a lot of magenta. Where you see almost no tone at all, the whites, the highlights, it's going to get very little magenta. This is the yellow. Now let's look at the black. In the black, you can't even tell that there's flowers on this dress. Same thing over here. Is this a lace dress? You can almost not even tell that there's lace there. And that's because when I look at these, let me zoom up and look at this dress. When I look at the difference between the background and the lace, the darker part versus the lighter part, there's a 3% difference in cyan here to here. So that means if I shifted 3% dot up here when I'm looking at the percentages, if I darken these little light areas up 3%, the lace would go away. I wouldn't even know that there was lace in this dress. So that tells you, that should tell you how important it is when we're doing color alterations to understand that a 3% difference can make a big jump from here to here. So keep that in mind as we're working on these. Now, one of the things that I'm looking at when I look at this, I'm seeing that there's a lot of highlight in here. This background or the dark part of her hair where it goes in, that would be considered shadow. The dark folds in this dress, those would be considered midtones. So I am going to want to adjust this picture and make sure when I'm working on this picture that I'm affecting the right part. So if the highlights are good right now, I don't want to work on the highlights. So those have to stay the same. If it's the midtones that I think got a little too dark in this, or maybe even the shadows, because her face is a little dark, that's when I have to do color corrections. In Photoshop, we have multiple ways of doing color corrections. One up here under image and adjustments, we have all these different types of color correction. Brightness or contrast, levels, curves, saturation, color balance, selective color, highlights and shadow adjustments, desaturate, all of these things. I will caution you, if you use image adjustments, once you make a color change and save your file, it's gone. It has made that change and you cannot undo it. So this is what we call destructive. So if I go image adjustments and do a curves or levels or color balance, it's going to be destructive and change it for good when you save it. Another way that we can do color, I could come over or tone, change the tone. I can use my retouching tools that we learned about last week. So if I want to lighten this dress up, I can come over and lighten that dress up just by drawing on that. And depending on what I'm working on, if I work on the highlights, notice it's really going heavy. I don't want to go there. I may want the highlights, but then I only want to do a little bit and lighten some of this up. And notice it's going into the highlights and it sees along this side more of a highlight than this side. This is midtones. So it's not affecting over here. So if I go to midtones and start going over this, notice I'm just seeing a little bit of a change. And up here, I'm seeing a little change. When I go over this side of the dress, hardly anything at all. That's because it says, when I set up my tones for this, just go to the midtones. Okay, so that's local color using the retouching tools. I'm going to bring that back. Now, the third way that we can do color corrections in Photoshop, and it's the preferred way, is using the adjustments panel. So remember, hold on a second, let me see if I can get this out of my way. Okay, the panels up here, to see one of these menus over here, we have adjustments, and it's usually on right here. So if I go to the adjustments panel, I get all these little icons. These little icons are the same thing, or a lot of the same anyway, that I saw up here: brightness, contrast, levels, curves. When I come down here, brightness, contrast, levels, curves. So we have a different way of doing some of the same things that I saw up in the image adjustments menus, but the difference is these are non-destructive. These are layer adjustments. So if I came down and said I wanted to affect the lightness contrast for this, notice when I click on this, it created a layer down here. And everything below this layer, this brightness contrast layer, is going to become affected. So as I start manipulating the brightness or the contrast, you'll notice that this picture on the left is being affected. The picture on the right is not, because this change that I'm making only affects things below it in the curves. If I took this layer and moved it up, now this one is also affected. They're both affected as I make changes. Okay, so it depends on where this layer adjustment layer is. Now, brightness contrast. Contrast is how fast does something go from light to dark. So more contrasty means that the dark areas get darker, the light areas get lighter. Less contrasty means it flattens out a picture. It kind of goes gray or muted. So contrast is one of the adjustments that we can make. Brightness, remember, brightness was either adding black to something or adding white to something. So we can use brightness contrast as well. If I don't like what I've done, I can come down to my layers panel and hold on. Some of these, I'm not getting enough room on this menu. Let me get this a little smaller. There, that's better. Okay, now if I don't like this change that I've made in my adjustments panel, I can come down to layers, click on this, and then say delete it. I have not lost any of the original tone that was in the picture. If I had come up here and said image, adjustments, brightness, contrast, it gives me the same little pop-up menu here that I can change brightness and contrast. But when I say okay, it's now made that change. There's no layer adjustment down here that I can go back to and alter. The only thing I can do is go back to my history panel and say delete that. I don't want that change. However, if I had saved my file, these would be gone. I don't have my history anymore. So keep that in mind, or it can overwrite them even as you're going along. All right, so if I needed to work on the shadows portion of this picture, I may come to this layer, and there's something called levels. So let's talk about levels. I'm going to show you, I'm going to actually bring this up here so you can see the whole menu as we're working on it and the layers. So levels, what this does is it looks at your image and it gives you what we call a histogram. This picture right here is showing you all the tone that we have in this picture. I think Photoshop even gives us a histogram panel if we wanted to look at it in color. So this histogram panel shows us all the colors in there. But in this case, it's showing me a histogram. And as I look at this, notice I got a little white triangle here. That says these are the number of white pixels. And there's a lot right down at the end. This is my midtone, the gray. And then this is the shadow. And so we get peaks and valleys in here. So we get enough little tone here, here, there. And then there's a peak in this gray, another peak in this darker gray, and almost to the black. If I want to adjust this, I could say, take my midtones and make them lighter. So this is doing an overall change, and it's saying all of these tones that are in my picture, see how spiky this is? There's a lot of these in here. Make change there. If I come even further, or I can say darken those up. Or if I put them back to 0 or the middle, I can take the light areas and lighten those, or the dark areas and darken that up some. So what I'm wanting to do is look at this picture, and if it had too much yellow in the highlights, let's say the dress was a little too yellow, I wanted it to be more of a pure white, I can come into the yellow, and I'm looking at this saying I need to take color away. If I needed to darken it up, I could go into the magenta, cyan, and black and increase those. Leave the yellow where it was, but increase the other 3. So in this case, I want to lighten this some. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to say I want to lighten up the yellow that's in the dress. So now when I go before and after, it's a subtle change, but before it was a cream colored dress, and now it's more of a white dress. And by doing that, that's the amount of change that someone may want to see. If you're buying clothing online or in a catalog, that color is very important to the person that thinking about buying that piece of clothing. So you need to make sure that that color matches what's there. So it may be a change like this. Now, how much did I move it? I can come over and put my cursor in a certain spot right here on her hip, and the cyan I left alone, magenta I left alone, the yellow came down 1%. That's all that this change did. It was enough to bring it down 1%. With my color sampling tool, I can actually make a color sampler tool that puts in multiple color samples. So if I'm now saying I want to track my really light highlights, I can put a dot right there. And that dot is showing me what number 1 looks like. If I then say I want to see what the midtones over on this side are going to do, what I'm doing to the shadows, maybe I put that out here, and maybe to the flesh tone, I can do that to there. So now I have 4 color samplers that as I start moving things around, it's showing me what I'm doing in each one of those yellows, because I'm only working on the yellow channel right now. But I may be making the highlights better, but I may be making the flesh tone worse. So you have to track and understand, do I want to work on all tones, lighten or darken the whole picture? And when I do that, all of these numbers for all 4 spots that I have identified here are adjusting. Or do I want to just work on one of these and make it a pinkish or bluish dress with very minor changes to these? Okay, I'm going to delete this one as well, this levels. There's another tool that we have in here called the curves. This next one over, curves, this allows me to adjust any part of my picture. So I can work on cyan, magenta, yellow, and black by themselves, or all 4 of those colors. If I change things on the bottom of this curve from here to here, that's the highlights. From here to about here is the midtones. This part of the curve are the shadows. So if I take this shadow point and start bringing it down, it's lightening. Anything below the 45 degrees from corner to corner, if I bring this in the lower half, it's going to lighten. If I bring it up in the darker half, it's going to darken. But what's nice is if I didn't want to affect my shadows, I could put a point here. And if I didn't want to affect my highlights, point here. And now when I move, notice this part's moving. This part up here is pretty much staying the same. So now I can affect just the midtones in all colors versus my shadows, which I wanted to leave the same. So there's a lot in here, just so you know, and it takes a lot of time to learn the correct usage of these. But key to all of this is when we're in curves below this line, this 45 degrees, if it's in this area, it is going to lighten. This area up here, it's going to darken the picture. And as I look at my photo and I look at these numbers that are here, I don't want to go more than 10% plus or minus. So as I look at this, this was 45 in magenta. I've gone to 37. If this went to 33, I'd probably go back to the photographer and say, I have to lighten this up too much. I'm compressing the tone so much that I'm losing detail. Retake this picture. It was not a well-lit picture. And a photographer is going to get mad at you and all of that, but at least it will be correct when you do it. Okay. Some of these other tools that you see in here, let me see. If we come down to hue saturation, I always like hue saturation. And I don't know if this one's going to be a good one for that. This is more highlights and shadows. Hold on, let me bring back that other picture that I had. Hold on. I'm going to bring back this picture of me and use the hue saturation window. Now, with hue saturation, we know that hue means the color family, and saturation means how intense is the color. So if I look at hue saturation and I say, change the colors for me, we can immediately make this sky into something really crazy, make the face into something nuts. Purples and greens, we're shifting the hue. If I want brighter colors, I can make that, all those blues, totally saturated. This is what I started with, and now everything just got intense, more vibrant. So that's what saturation. If we desaturate something, desaturating means make it grayish. Oops, got to turn this on. Make it gray. So now, as I go from the middle of the road, and as I go this way, it's actually taking the color out. So it's removing the hues that were there and replacing it and making it just into a black and white. So saturation can be intense color or no color at all, is what saturation does. Then lightness or darkness, we're adding black or lightening, adding white to something. So you may want to do just minor changes to lighten something or darken something, make something slightly brighter or slightly more muted, or change it from one color family to another color family. Typically, you don't do a lot with the hues. Now, that was working with all of the colors in the picture. I could use a selection. I could make a selection like I did before and say, just the blues in the sky. Or they give me the ability to come in and say, just work on blues, which would be the darker colors, or cyans. So if I pick cyan and I want to see what the color modifications are, notice it's only working in the sky and the water, because those are what have a color family known as cyan. Down here, this isn't changing. These white aren't changing. This down here is not changing. So as I modify these hues, I'm taking everything that was cyan in the picture and making it a different hue. So you can do a lot of fun stuff with this, but mostly it will be if someone says, make the sky more vibrant. I can come and now try to make the sky and the ocean more like a Caribbean ocean and sky, or no, make it a colder day, grayer day. So now my water is looking darker and less blue. I can darken or lighten those as well, but I'm only working on the cyans. What if I only wanted to work on the reds? So now notice it's pretty much my face and a couple other small things in the picture. So if I had to lighten up my face, I might come in here, say, just work on the reds, and then change the lightness or the darkness some. Lighten it up. Change the saturation a little bit. And so now I'm able to actually make a change there to lighten it that wasn't having to do selections and all sorts of masks and things to get this a little lighter. So keep that in mind, that we also have magentas. So I could do something with the magentas and it might work there as well. Nope, that's all red. All right, I'm going to delete that one. Back in our list of things that we can do, we also have, let me see, a color balance. And color balance is talking about mid-tone, or excuse me, trying to get the grays to look good. And so if we make something more cyan, it's going to make it less red. If we make something more magenta, it's going to be less green. So if I look at, say, this sky, I'm looking at 29% cyan up here and a 48% cyan down here. So if I alter this and make it more cyan or less cyan, it's going to increase the reds. So now when I look over here, the magenta is changing and it's adding more magenta to my sky. So color balance is all about making sure that my grays look gray. So this one, it's a little too yellow in these grays. So now I've modified it and it's looking much better. I'm looking at the numbers. When I look at this, remember, you can't trust your monitor. Your monitor is not color accurate to what the output's going to be. So you have to learn what the numbers will give you. And that one's tough. That will take practice. Okay. It's probably easiest, let me see, if I even show you, well, I'm going to show you two more images in my Photoshop. Okay, if I bring up these two images and arrange two up, there we go. Okay, let me put this back down in here for now. As we look at these two refrigerators, I've got a KitchenAid and a Samsung. Which one is correct?
Samsung.
Samsung? Okay. And that's, why do you think Samsung's correct? Why isn't the KitchenAid the good tone?
Normally we use gray, like plate color. The other one is too yellow, like gray,
Okay,
and
good. You're definitely getting it. One of the things that we need to talk about is neutrality. And neutrality is, does something that is supposed to be stainless steel, is it a bluish stainless steel? Is it a yellowish stainless steel? What we need to understand is that one of these, or they may both be correct. The Samsung might be a darker, and it might have a bluish, purplish cast to it. So a cast means that there's more of one color than should be there. So if you're looking at a field or the ocean with a sunset, I expect everything to have orangish, yellowish cast to it. So the water, the sand, the sky, everything has a yellow and orange, extra yellow and orange. During the day, normal sunlight, it wouldn't have an orange-yellow cast. So in this case, this kind of has a blue and magenta cast to it, a purpley cast. This KitchenAid kind of has a yellow cast. So if I want to neutralize these, make it gray. Neutralizing means removing the cast and making something gray. I need to pick the picture that I'm working on and then look at the numbers. So as I look at this, where my cursor is checking out right now, I have 34% cyan, 27 magenta, 28. Tell you the truth, this one is, by the numbers, correct. If I look at this one over here, this one has too much cyan and magenta compared to the yellow. So this one's going to be more purpley. So I'd have to go into my adjustments, say I want to modify those. I'm going to use levels. And because I'm working on only one color, I need to come in and say, okay, I need to balance out these colors to give me an even tone. So that means I'm probably going into my blue, which affects yellow tones when I'm doing red, green, and blue. And now as I move that just slightly, I'm looking to make these numbers in the red, green, and blue equal. If I make those numbers equal, 136, 137, and 136, now it's a gray tone. It doesn't have more magenta and yellow, or magenta and cyan, than yellow. So that made that one right. This one over here, they're already equal. This is a darker stainless steel than this one. Maybe this needs to darken up and get some contrast, but this one over here may need to lighten up because this almost looks like it's a dark gray, not a stainless steel. So now I come back over onto this picture of the Samsung, and now I say I need to darken it up overall. Maybe I go into curves and I say, darken the whole thing or lighten the whole thing. Oops, I'm doing the wrong one. I thought I was on the right picture. I wasn't in the right picture. Here we go. So now if I go in to my levels and I say I want to, or I guess levels I can do, lighten that up. So now if all of the refrigerator, stove, washer machine, dishwasher, if they're all a light tone like this, but they're gray, this is what it should be. And so we've modified almost 15%. That's a lot of tone when I went from this dark to this. This one over here, I may need to make an adjustment. And in this case, It may even be contrast that I need to adjust, make the darks a little darker and the lights a little lighter on this one to get what I want. Okay. So we need to look at the numbers, see what we're doing, and balance those numbers if we want a gray so that there's no color cast. All right. Now, like any of the things that we work on in Photoshop, practice makes you much better. And so what we're going to need to do is work on the next assignment. The next assignment is assignment number 3. And what we're using is this picture. And I'm going to give you this picture to work with. Now, this picture's been put together in Photoshop, multiple layers. And the reason why we chose this picture, notice we've got the clam bake over here. It's got saturated colors, strong reds, strong greens, yellows. The plates are a strong blue. It also has some grays in there. The plate, the steel, stainless steel on here, it's got some shadows. It has highlights. What we're trying to do when we pick a test image is pick an image that is going to show the full tonal range. Everything that you need to test when you're working on understanding these color tools. Now, the other side of this picture is a wrench that when I look at the channels, there's a cyan, a magenta, a yellow, and a black when it comes to the wrench. You put all of those together and it gives you this brownish sepia tone look to this wrench. I like to have something black and white in my picture and something with all the tonal range of color so that when I'm making a change, I know what I'm doing to my neutral areas and I know what I'm doing to the color areas. Yeah, what's your question?
To the saturated, can we be working just layer by layer?
You could definitely work on the channel by channel, or you could work on the layers if you just wanted to work on the wrench and then work a different layer for just the clam bake side. Good. Now, here's something else that as you're learning color, every photography teacher will tell you this as well. It's good to have what we call a step scale. So I created this step scale, and it's actually a separate file that I have on my computer. So I can paste this into any photo, and as I'm making changes to that photo, I can see what I'm doing to the full tonal range. Now, if I come up to this first one, notice this has 5% cyan, 5% magenta, 5% yellow in that spot. This next one's 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. So as I'm working on highlights, I'd only expect these steps, these grays up here to be affected. If I'm working on midtones, it should work in this area more. If I'm working in the shadows, it's going to work down here. So as I look at the clam bake, if I wanted to just work on the clam bake, I could come and make a selection around the clam bake. And I'm going to include this step scale when I do. If I wanted to lighten the shadows, I could come into, say, levels, come into the shadow area, and I could work on lightening those shadows. And notice what I'm doing here. Everything's lightened up. I don't even have a black in this picture anymore by working on these shadows like that. If I wanted to work on my midtones, notice I've worked on the midtones, but I've actually made the 95, 90 into a midtone. It's no longer a shadow. The only thing that's a shadow is the black 100%. 95, 90, 80. These are now pretty much a midtone. As I'm reading them, they're 67% instead of 90%. So that I may have gone way too far trying to lighten up the shadow area, just the shadow area. So I like working with selections to work just on a certain part of my picture in color correction or tone correction. And I like having this step scale included so I can see what I'm doing, especially when you're learning. Okay, I mentioned that this is the picture you're going to use as we go through this next assignment. So I'm going to show you what the next assignment is. So the next assignment is color adjustment assignment. You can find this in the assignments area. And when I click, you can download this picture right from there. But also, here's the instruction sheet. The instruction sheet tells you it's going to be due on April 3rd. You're going to have 5 contact sheets put into one. And so I'll explain that in a minute. And this is how you make that contact sheet right here. But these are all the color corrections you're going to do. So you're going to start with that clam bake image, and that's your original. So I want you to put your email name with an A after it and save that. Next, we're going to open up that original file and do curves to that. Going to go into the shadows and make adjustments. So we're going to do this together in class. Okay. And hopefully by the time we get, I think there are 25 of these. So by the time we go through all 25 of these, you should be feeling a little bit better about all of the color correction tools. But right now, stop share. What I need you to do is go into, well, I'll just put it in the chat because I have these. I'm going to put the image that you're going to use, that color test image. I'm going to put that in the chat. And it is a 6 megabyte file. So if you have slow downloads, it might take a little bit, but that's in the chat so you can download it. It's also in Blackboard in the assignments. I'll also upload the assignment sheet to you, which is a PDF, and it lists all of the different color corrections that you're going to have to do. So when you're working on this, you're going to have your PDF open of what changes you want to make, what color corrections you want to make, and you're going to have Photoshop open to work on the actual color test image. Okay. All right. I'm going to go back to sharing the screen. And yes. And this. I'm going to actually open my color correction as PDF. Excellent. Okay, so what you need to do for this next assignment, assignment number 3, is we need to work on this non-destructively. That means you're going to be using adjustment layers for your color corrections. You are not using the top menus. You are using the layer panel adjustments. So you are going to open up color test. That's going to be your original. And in the end, let me see. Let me see if I have. In the end, you are going to have a folder filled with color adjustment pictures that look like these. Once all of those are done, you are then going to put them together into what we call a contact sheet. And let me see if I have a contact sheet available.
Excuse me, Professor.
Yeah,
That means we're gonna be working every time we do something, we're gonna save it separate.
yes, you are going to have a folder. So I would
Okay.
start by creating a folder and putting your color test file in there and change color test. Make sure your email name is on there. And so you're going to be saving this file. Original is going to be named with an A at the end behind your email name. Then after we make the first correction, we are going to be making that a B. So as I bring this up, my original, so I'm going to go back into Photoshop. This is my original file. It's called color test. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to do a file, save as, create a new folder right on my desktop, and I'm going to call it SFuse color sign 3. So color assignment 3, creating my folder. So now I have this folder, but this file that's here, I'm going to name this SFuse _ A. And so this is my original clam bake picture that I'm putting into this folder, and say, get my save. Yep, save. And this all looks good. So now I have that saved in the folder. Next, I need to go back to my assignment sheet. And this tells me to go to curves. I'm going to be working on all 4 channels. I need to work in the shadow area of curves, starting out with 85 and output 100. And that one's going to be named SFuse for mine with a B at the end. So now when I look at this, coming back to Photoshop, and before I even do that, let me come back to Photoshop, and I'm going to do an adjustments layer. Well, I'm going to get rid of this levels that's here because that's not my original. And now adjustments, curves, this one that looks like a grid pattern, little graph. And in my graph, I need to find my shadow point. Now, remember, this curve can have as many points as I want. This bottom one down by the white triangle is my highlight dot. This one, if I look here and go straight up from my shadow, this, when I intersect this, this is my shadow point. So I click on that. And what that tells me, if I make this window a little bit bigger, is my input is 100 and my output is 100. I haven't made any color corrections. What started out as 100 is now 100. So if I'm going to change this and say that my input is 85, which is what the assignment sheet says for this first one, notice what it did to my point. It moved this down to 85. If this is 100 and this is 50 and this is 0 along this axis, I've in fact moved all of my shadow things down till they're 85. So anything from 85 or above now outputs at 100. Check this out over here on my step scale. This is 100, 90 is 100, 85 is 100. So these are all 100. There is no tone, and I really darkened up my picture. If I turn on and off the eyeball, you can see that I've made it a lot darker in the shadow areas mostly. Okay, so once I'm happy with that, put this back down in here. This is B, so I'm going to do a save as, and you notice you've got a quick key, Shift, Control or Command S will be save as. And in this case, I want it to not be A, because A was my original. I want it to be B. And save it in this same folder, my color corrections folder, and hit save. So now I have 2 files in that folder. When I look in my SViews, I have my original, and I have the one where 85 and above gets darkened to 100%. So that was using curves. All right. The next version I need is using curves, shadow point. However, my input stays at 100 and my output goes to 85. So here, remember in my layers, this has the old in there. If I look at this, this has the old curves. So I either have to delete this to get back to my original, or I could have gone to history and said, go back in the history and delete the other one. But I have to get back to my original that has the full tonal scale. Once I get that, I'm going back into my curves for, this is going to be C. And I need to pick my shadow point. So pick this top left corner, top right corner, excuse me. And this one, the input is staying at 100, but it's the output that goes to 85. So in fact, I've come lower than the 45-degree line. So that means everything, even the 100% spot, is 85. I don't have any 90. I don't have 100 in this picture anymore. I don't have a solid black. I have only up to 85% coverage. Okay, so once we get that, and I can see before and after what happened to it, it lightened up all the shadows, but didn't do too much to the midtones or the highlight at all. Now I'm ready to do a save as. Shift Command S gives me a save as, and this one should be C. And I'm putting in my same folder. Okay. And now that I'm back here, I want to make sure that I'm not using this when I'm working on my next one. So I'm going to delete this. So now it's back down to generic. I don't have anything on my layers except my original. All right. Does somebody else want to share their screen and we can do the next ones instead of me doing all of them? Anybody want to share their screen and do these? I'll walk you through them. All right, then you're going to have to watch me do them. Okay. All right. So if we're working on D, D is now working on highlights. So highlight, the 10% input is 0. So now I'm going back to my adjustment layers. I'm using my curves function. Going, and I have to, my monitor is small. I need to pick the highlight, which is down this side of the curve, not the top, but the bottom down here. So now it's 0, 0. If I look at D, it says make my input 10 and my output 0. Check out what it did up here in my highlights. I had a 0, I had 5, 10, and now it took away all the light tones. So there is no tone left in part of this plate. It's actually washed out part of the highlights that were in here. So there is no 5% or 10% anymore. Everything starts at white, what was before 10. Okay, so I'm going to save this one. Do a save as. This one's going to be D. Okay. Are you getting this? This is your next assignment. So if we do as much as we can in class, then it's going to save you from having to do it at home. Oh, we're almost running out of time. So tell you the truth, I think we'll probably extend this another class, the due date. So it won't be due next class because there is a lot here. And as we get to different functions, you're going to have to do things differently. Okay, so I'm going to say for now, save this folder that you've been working on. If you want to start working on these yourself and you feel comfortable doing it, go for it. If you don't, we'll go through these next class and make the contact sheet next class as well. But what I do want to continue talking about is also next week is what's due is, let me go into your modules. Another thing that we start this week is tutorials. Now we finished all of the chapters in the textbook. You've done all your assignments in the textbook and you took exam number 1. Now we work on the second half of class after spring break. And instead of textbook learning, we're going to use some tutorials. And tutorials, what they should be is if you're concerned, if you didn't understand some of the retouching tools or the color correction tools, or you just want to figure out a neat way of doing some kind of an effect, you can search the internet and find a tutorial. It's full of them. And so what you're going to do is over the next 7 weeks, you're going to do 4 tutorials. So you're going to search for something, find it on the web that was interesting, that would help you learn maybe how to use 2 or 3 tools together and come out with a result. When you do this, you are going to be putting a 72 DPI JPEG up into Blackboard. You are also in the comments section of Blackboard, you are going to write tutorial number 1 and 2 things you learned when you did your tutorial and what the URL or the web address for that tutorial was. Okay, so you're going to have to do 4 things. Upload maybe a before and after picture of what you worked on. Write tutorial number 1, 2 things that you learned, and the URL. Now, where do you find these tutorials? Well, I went and searched amazing Photoshop tutorials, and there are some that come up as ads, but here's 100 awesome effects tutorials from Design Tuts Plus. This creative blog has 72 awesome. So, or you could go in and you could search, I want to figure out how to do neon, create a neon wall with a tutorial in Photoshop. So I found this, and it's a 10-minute, 11-minute effects how to do this in YouTube. So you can find videos for that. But you can also probably find a way of doing it that's just a glow effect, and it will walk you through the steps. So some of these are nice because they're not a video. That one might be a video. So this one might have a video, but it might have the steps as well. Notice, no, I don't want you talking to me. So to make this neon, I could watch the video on how to do it. Or I could come down here and it says create a brick background. And there is a brick background pattern inside Photoshop. So I can get a brick background. Then it tells me, once I get my bricks all made up, how to make the neon. So it's using curves and hue saturation. And keeps going and keeps going. Like I said, you could follow the video part, but then it shows you this is how you're going to get your layer style to look. And then if you don't want blue, you want pink, you could do that. So this one has a lot going on in it. So many steps. But you'll notice it's using 2 or 3. It's using a brush. It's using color correction tools. It's using some background creation with these bricks. So layer masks. This one's kind of an advanced tutorial. Whereas if I came over here and looked at some of these tutorials, they might be just easier. So you are going to search the web and find tutorials that will tell you how to do something. If you're concerned and don't understand how to use the clone stamp tool, do a tutorial on the clone stamp tool. If you know how to do that and you want to figure out how to use something else, search for that and find a tutorial that's really going to be interesting. Now, once you're done with this, next week, this is going to be due. So you need to copy the URL, 2 things you learned, upload all of that into Blackboard, into tutorial number 1, the Dropbox. And next week, you're going to show what you found for a tutorial. So just the image, maybe the before and the after, and what that URL was. So that if someone else in the class says, that's really cool, how did you do that? I don't know how you did that. For tutorial number 2, you can do that. If you didn't do that tutorial already, you can grab that tutorial and do the same one that someone else did in the class the week before. Okay? So a tutorial is just a way that you're able to actually see how you put multiple tools together to create a new effect in Photoshop. I will caution you, don't go for if you see one that has 99 steps to it, it might be too intense. It might be a long time working on that one. So consider maybe just doing beginners. Search for a beginner tutorial for neon effect in Photoshop, if that's what you want. It may only be 10 steps and it might be only 5 minutes to do it. Okay. Does that make sense? What these tutorials are all about? All right. So for next class, if I look at the syllabus, I'm seeing that for next class, tutorial number 1 is due. And it said these color adjustments were due. By the end of class, we will work on the assignment number 3 during class. So you don't have to worry that that one's not done. We'll work on it in class, create the contact sheet, and you'll be able to upload that into Blackboard. Okay, so hopefully we'll finish that the first half of class, and we can get into layer masks for the second half of class, which is what we're supposed to be covering. Color is a big part of Photoshop, and working on these images. So you have to understand that getting the right color, someone's going to look sickly or sunburn if you don't have the correct tone in that picture. If you don't match, I used to work in production at we were a color separator is what we were called back then, but we were a place that did all the color corrections for lots of catalogs. So we did LL Bean catalogs. And what they do is they'd cut a little piece of the hem off a pair of khaki chinos that LL Bean was selling. They'd send the photo, we'd scan that photo, and then we had to make sure that the color from that scan was the same as the little piece of fabric that they cut from the inside of the hem, to make sure that if it was a reddish chino versus a yellowish chino versus a stone, no color at all, whitish, off-white chino, it needed to match, because if it didn't and it got returned and they checked off the box, why did you return? The color didn't match what was in the catalog. We got charged back for that at my company because they were getting returns because the color in the picture that they were buying the product from didn't match the final. Okay. So color is huge when it comes to making a consideration. If I said to you, I'm going to give you an iPhone, but it's the pink iPhone. Some of you might say, great, I want that. I want that. Some of you may say, no, I don't want a pink iPhone. Are you kidding me? I get razzed so much by my friends. That's the difference. Color makes a big difference. So we need to make sure that we're getting the color right, because minor colors between coral and peach are enough to turn one person on and turn another person off. Okay, so getting the colors right is important. All right, are there any questions? We covered a lot on color today. Anything? All right, remember that you can get in touch with me, send me an email if we need a one-on-one to do anything, to cover any of the assignments or any of the lectures. Just let me know, and we can set up a time that's convenient for both of us. All right, I will see you next Monday. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.